David Quist is a microbiologist and restaurateur who believes in the power of microbes. Listen as this American, based in Scandinavia, tells us how he makes sense of the world upside down. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
It is a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. So I always begin the podcast with the question, what do you believe?
Yes, I do love this question because it's just so many different dimensions and different sparks fly in my head. But I've been, like many people, very engrossed in the current events. And so I would answer, I believe that the adversity we're facing today is the perfect opportunity for transformation. It's the perfect, we're amidst of a global pandemic, a global climate crisis, social upheaval, the US and around the globe, basically. But it really provides an opportunity to re-examine and redefine how things are set up. Re-examine and redefine our social structures in ways that help us refocus on what's really important for many people, taking care of each other, the planet, and reimagining what we want our systems to be about. Is it about profit and financial rewards, or is it about prosperity, well-being for all? So I really feel, well, a lot of people feel pessimistic now. I believe right now is such an exciting time to be alive, that the opportunity for transformation and for creating the future that we want to see in the face of a lot of shitty things. Can I say that on?
Yes, okay? Of course, okay. You could say it.
A lot of shitty things happening.
Yes.
That it's an exciting time for transformation. And so I believe that we're in the midst of those transformations. I'm very excited about it.
That's a great answer. Thank you. I'm wondering if it has anything to do with, in terms of transformation, you're American, right? But you live in Oslo and spend a great deal of time also in Copenhagen. I'm curious if because you sound incredibly positive, and I'm wondering, does that have anything to do with where you are in the world?
Wow. Norway has been incredibly, well, some would say lucky, but I guess you could say lucky in the pandemic. We have had very few cases and even fewer deaths comparatively. And I think that has a lot to do with this way that Norway is set up and things are set up in Scandinavia. There's a already built-in high level of social trust. Things work. People are interested in, have a kind of communal mindset about things. And I really think that has helped us kind of deal with the pandemic in ways that other countries probably have not been able to. So I think that transformation that I see that probably in places, because things are already pretty good here. So maybe that those kind of same dysfunctions aren't so apparent in our system, although we have them, but they've been really laid bare in other parts of the world that in ways that we haven't had to have the kind of response. But I have gone through real transformation, in kind of this kind of more collective mindset about things, about it being work-life balance, about society being oriented, taking care of the vulnerable and the needy, in just the way that it operates. And so that has been something that I've kind of adopted over the years. I've been here for about 15 years now, and really is I really feel quite Nordic in that respect. But I think that's what's really helped us in the pandemic, is that we do have a lot of these things that other countries are saying, we need more solidarity and social trust. It's already built into the mentality of this society, and has really been good for us in the face of the pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, we certainly can learn a lot from the Scandinavian way of life and Scandinavian society for sure. I'm so curious. You are a microbiologist. You are a restaurateur. Why microbiology? What spurred this interest of yours?
Well, I've always been fascinated by life underneath, this kind of the unseen world, right? And when I was a child, I grew up in Kansas. So this is like about as far from the ocean as you can get, right? But I was uniquely fascinated with the show that was on PBS when I was a kid, the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau.
Mm.
And I don't know if you know Jacques Cousteau is, but he was this French intrepid pioneer of the sea with this insatiable curiosity and passion and love for the underwater life and its conservation. And he produced these documentaries where you could just feel his passion. He would explain things about underwater life, and it was bizarre and different and unseen and so forth. And I'd find myself as a young kid, like swimming around my living room floor, talking like Jacques Cousteau. They got the fish, and really just drinking deep on his insatiable curiosity and passion for the unseen world. And I really took that as my own odyssey. So I ended up studying, so I was always curious about the natural world, and I ended up studying botany, plants, as my undergraduate degree. But I quickly got turned on to how plants form symbioses with the microbial world, largely under the soil, this unseen, invisible world, where really it was fascinating for me. And I really saw when I walked through the forest, I wouldn't see so much the trees and the things that were going on. I saw it almost upside down. I would see all the things operating below ground that were essential to life as we know it. These carbon cycles and different systems and the interactions going on of upteen billions of organisms simultaneously communicating and interacting below ground. It was happening above ground. What fascinated me was the behind the scenes kind of essential nature of these organisms. And they're indeed incredible. I mean, they're both fundamental to, as I said, all these processes, but also really mysterious. Scientists have estimated we know about, have cataloged a fraction of a percent of all the viruses and bacteria that exist on this planet. Like, there is this massive diversity we just have no knowledge of here on our planet, right?
Yes.
They're found everywhere, and they're coexisting and co-evolving with all life forms on the planet, including ourselves. And it's this huge array of properties and functions and capacities of the microbes that really, I saw that there was something there in exploring these potentialities for creating a more sustainable future. So, for example, in my restaurant, we look at ways that we could take waste products that we normally throw away and maybe use an enzyme from a microbe that would make it edible, right? So we're not wasting so much. Or that we could create new materials from fungi or bacteria to exist polluting products is another curiosity of mine. So the potential from the microbial world, we've mainly explored this through fermentation, but it's like we're just getting the tip of the iceberg of what's possible there. So it's that curiosity and creativity that has really driven me of the microbial world.
I love it. I love this. This is the narrative behind the food biology and sustainability.
Yes, fantastic. Absolutely. I mean, and that's the sustainability thing comes in. I mean, a kitchen is really this place of, it's like a lab. I mean, a kitchen and a lab are really not that different, right? I mean, it's this area of infinite exploration of how you create a dish or how you combine different ingredients. So we do that in the laboratory as well. In a kitchen, you're kind of looking for a specific outcome, like a deliciousness primarily, or the way a dish looks. We try to be more open-ended and impartial in science, and it's not looking for a specific outcome when we design the experiment. But it's kind of the same principles of cataloging and asking questions and looking for answers. But in the kitchen, you have guests that are kind of witnessing this that you don't really have in a lab, that's also kind of participating in this curiosity and so forth, and sometimes really driving it because you want to create something different for the guests and for yourself, to keep it interesting. So that's where the innovation side comes in.
Beautiful. I love that. What has taught you, what has being a restaurateur taught you as opposed to a scientist, the differences?
I mean, aside from the similarities are like I said, the kitchen and the lab are very similar, but restaurants are very different beasts. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who haven't worked in the restaurant world have this kind of glamorous view about what it is. But I mean, people that gravitate to the lifestyle of the kitchen, it's a hard life. It's full of people who have, a passion and an energy for that lifestyle, but it creates a lot of wear and tear and dysfunction. You have a lot of people who have it very rough, and a lot of drug abuse, and people with problems and stuff. You have that in all walks of life.
Right.
But there's something about the energy and the passion of a kitchen where every service, you're like going into this intense, emotional, like high-paced journey. Everybody's functioning and working together. That's both mentally exhausting at the end of the day, but also binding to each other in that mentality of doing something together, of creating an experience night after night for guests. That is bonding that you don't really get in a lab. I mean, you do your work and you have your interactions, but it's not this passionate kind of interplay day in and day out. So it's a restaurant and a kitchen is quite different in that respect. And it requires a different way of interacting with people, motivating people. And the attrition rate's very high in restaurants, right? So people will stay for a short while, but they want a new experience, and so they go on. So then you have to retrain new people, hopefully find people that align with your vision, and keep everything moving forward. And that can be quite difficult.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it's very, very challenging. I mean, I worked in a restaurant when ages ago, and it was the hardest job. But you definitely felt a sense of community there. Everyone that works in the restaurant is just, you're like one. You have to be one, movement. It's kind of like you're all just sort of doing the job, and it's a neat experience. I think it's essential. It's an essential experience.
Absolutely. Few people are in it for the money. I mean, you're in it for the passion and for the camaraderie and for doing something special. And that's why I kind of got into that game was about the creativity, but also doing something different, offering an experience for guests that's quite different than what you might get in another restaurant.
Right. Absolutely. I'm curious, in terms of what's happening right now in the pandemic, being a scientist, how are you looking at this crazy situation, this pandemic? How is it? What's your take? What's your prediction?
Oh my goodness, about how societally or how the pandemic's going to come out,
all of
biology.
It.
I mean, I'm fascinated by and this time I've had a lot more time off because the restaurant was closed for some time, right? We're open again, but on a lower level, has kind of afforded me the opportunity to go deep into the biology of this virus and how it interacts with our bodies, and what the different initiatives and how they impact the development of the epidemiology of the disease and so forth. And it's incredibly fascinating. I think it's incredibly fascinating. At the same time, I think, now as we're getting to know that immunity, the emerging picture is that our immunity is short-lived. When you developed specific antibodies to the virus, they only last for a few months at best. And so this idea that we were going to have a silver bullet, everyone was saying once we have a vaccine, was being repeated by world leaders over and over. And that is quickly evaporating as being the silver bullet we thought it would be to get us back to normalcy. So we're faced with with two things I think that are important. One is a situation that we're going to be living with this for the considerable future, that there is not going to be a silver bullet in a vaccine whenever it does appear. And so what that new normal looks like is anyone's guess. But I think it also heightens an appreciation, which is one of my other kind of pet things about microbes, is the importance of really redefining our relationship with microbes, right? I mean, most people, when they think of microbes, they think of germs, and they think of, things that make us sick, right? And they don't really realize that the vast majority of microbes are beneficial to the planet and to people. And they don't really consider that while, the whole world of the microcosm inside of us and the microbiome, while we like to think of ourselves as individuals, like an individual living creature, in reality, that's not the case. I mean, our body is full of viruses and fungi and bacteria that live on and within us.
Mm.
And I know that sounds gross to a lot of people, right? It's like, oh, there's all this stuff. But the truth is that we live, and these things live within us and provide a number of benefits to us for digesting food, immune system support. They help synthesize vitamins and even maintain our mental health, we're learning, right? So the essentiality of these microbes in our system, which there's like 10 times more bacterial cells in our body than there are human cells.
Mm.
That we've co-evolved different processes with. And when you think about it, like, where does the human start and the microbe ends, and vice versa, right? Because we've given over some of our vital human functions to these organisms. It's kind of, you really start thinking of the notion of we rather than just I, from a kind of existential point of view.
Mm.
But back to where I think it's important for COVID is that we also need to be thinking and taking care of not just, saying, oh, we need to sanitize everything and we need to just, use antibiotics and antivirals and therapeutics against this one pathogen, but we need to think about the homeostasis of all the resident microbes that live within us, because it's when they're in balance, it's when they're out of balance is when we are susceptible to pathogens. But when we focused on and appreciated the balance that we have with these persistent colonists, they're not going anywhere. They're always within us and they're going to be within us. And establish a better relationship that takes care of those, I think it's going to help us deal with COVID in that we will have more background, non-specific immunity because we're taking care of our natural microbial systems that live on and within us. So when there's a deeper appreciation for this, I think that it's going to actually, and those that actually think about that will have an easier time dealing once and if they become susceptible and have a case of COVID, how much they're impacted. So point is that rather than focusing on this warlike mentality and sanitizing everything, we need to redefine and think about the importance of all the microbes that live within us in maintaining our health, and particularly in the face of a pandemic.
Wow, it's fascinating. What do you think the next wave of social responsibility will be?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a number of things. I think one of them is right now at this time, I think this pandemic has exposed the way things are set up, and people are getting awareness and wanting to do the right thing and support systems.
Well, not everyone, by the way.
Not everyone.
Not everyone.
Not everyone. This is true, and it's easy for us to kind of see what people are doing around us. And being in the restaurant sphere, there's so much solidarity going on right now. So it feels very much like that, like everyone at times. But I think that it has opened up people to look more at our humanity a little bit more closely. So one of the things that I think that we're seeing is that people are more in tune to the impact of their purchasing decisions, that they're taking more responsibility in understanding where the products that they come from and what they choose to invest their money in impacts the globe. So I like to think that that's been a good outcome that's happened as a result of what we're facing. I mean, you're even seeing this now more forcefully in the industry in this notion of tailored consumerism. So now we're getting to the place where there's artificial intelligence that's being used to kind of not only to try and get certain kinds of products that they know that you purchase, but also to come up with metrics. And some of this is mandated by governments and others to develop metrics that allow you to look at like ecological and CO2 footprints of products so that you can make more informed choices on what the future you want, right? Because our purchasing power does largely determine what products are going, what capitalism is going to bring forth in the marketplace. So for better or for worse, these metrics are coming to the fore in shaping what is kind of a more tailored process in terms of targeting our purchasing decisions. And on one hand, it has a very capitalist directive. On the other hand, it is helping us make more sensitized choices of our purchasing. So I think there's a good thing. So I think that's where it's also very convenient for people because instead of having to go and search it out, they say, oh, this metric told me that this is socially responsible. much like an organic label does or sustainability label might do, right? So it's kind of making it easier for people to make those choices for better or for worse. But when there's some legitimacy behind those labels, that's great. But I think that's where people are going to be putting their social responsibility on informing themselves on some level on their purchasing power.
Yes, and transparency. Brands having more transparency in how they're getting things made and where they're getting things sourced and all of it. Yes. Absolutely. And
it's really emerging and working, in this sphere. It's really emerging that look at the metrics that sustainability, it actually helps the bottom line when companies that take care of these things and are transparent and do kind of make all of that information known, that people gravitate towards that, and actually has been better for their bottom. The investment has been enough. And I think there are people behind these corporations, and some of them have consciousness that say, we need to be we're the part of the problem, we need to be a part of the solution. Yeah, there's a lot of greenwashing out there, but that transparency is key to kind of be able to figure out which ones are really genuinely in it for the right reasons.
Right. No, that's very true. So David, what breaks your heart?
Oh my goodness. When I just thinking about it, it almost breaks my heart. A couple of things on a kind of broader scale. I've had the opportunity to travel a lot for work, and I did part of my PhD work in Mexico in impoverished communities in the state of Oaxaca. And it's almost incredible to me that we still live in an age, despite the immense wealth of resources and ideas, that we live in with increasing economic and social inequalities in this planet. It seems that with all this wealth, that we would be able to target that as going in the wrong direction for the kind of planet that we want, that we have these persistent problems that only become more intractable as these disparities grow. And that breaks my heart. And seeing that as I have through my work has made it a mantra for me to work against that. And that's one thing that breaks my heart. On a more personal, everyday level, I would say what breaks my heart in being a restaurateur and working in restaurants is not being able to hug people.
Yeah.
Do you feel this, right? Like seeing someone that you haven't seen for a while, or a guest coming in who's, has been on vacation, comes back, and you're just like, holding yourself back from wanting to give this big bear hug. Because I was used to hugging the regulars and hugging, our employees on a daily basis. And the restaurant, we set the restaurant up to be this convivial shoulder-to-shoulder space that created people. Norwegians aren't so used to talking to strangers. And so we set up the restaurant for this kind of closeness and interactivity to break people out of their shells and create bonds between people that didn't know each other. Well, and then that was in 2019, and now comes Corona, and that's just not. And it's heartbreaking that all the things that I love about the restaurant have kind of overnight evaporated to the point that we have to kind of find new ways to create that. We're very adaptable, and we will find new ways to do it. But that essence of that touch and that hug and that connection, that physical connection with people, has been heartbreaking for me, and that's largely, I think, been why returning the restaurant. And that's been the biggest challenge: is how do we create a convivial atmosphere that is where you want to go and eat, rather than just take the delicious food home and do it in kind of the confines of your home. How do we create that in the age that we find, in the situation that we find ourselves in?
So how are you doing that?
It's a challenge. We basically removed almost all tables from our restaurant. We only have 5 out of 18 tables indoors. We have a big outdoor space, so we've just moved it outdoors. It's tough. We try to provide the information to people because we want to maintain a curiosity about the food and where it's come from, how it's made. But we're doing it more in showing them where they can get the information rather than staying at the table and talking them through the menu and doing these things that would be a more personal interaction, that we need to limit the personal interaction that we have at this time. And we've done that mostly by bringing the service outdoors to reduce the risk of possible transmission, but also just keeping the level of information and keeping the level of curiosity to our guests, so that they can kind of also see like, oh, what are you guys doing new? And you know, bringing things out. Maybe we're testing something and just bring it out to a regular and say, hey, try this. We haven't put on the menu. What do you think? And keep doing those things that keep people connected to the place. But it's a challenge when you have to remove people from, you know, distance everyone else. And the most respectful thing you could do is to leave them alone, right? And not actually go talk to them unless you have to. Right. So that's kind of how we've been adapting.
It's really, yeah, that's so different. So the name of your restaurant in Oslo, for those who may not know, is, how do you pronounce it?
It's Rimnir. So just the H is silent. So it's not the most approachable name, but we chose it. It's an old Viking word, which means something covered in soot or char from a fire. Oh. And we chose this because I mean, I'm a Kansas City boy, so at heart. So grilling is kind of close to my heart, but I also appreciate the kind of visceral response that we have to cooking food as something that we've been doing in time immemorial, that I think brings out this kind of gut response to us. And I find it very delicious. So we grill a lot of the food, a lot of the toppings that go on our ramen. We do a Japanese style ramen dish made from Nordic ingredients.
I have to tell you, I mean, I've never been to your restaurant. I'm dying to go. Every time I see a photo of this ramen, my taste buds are just screaming for it. It just looks so incredible. And, you know, it's a work of art.
Well, thank you. I mean, ramen's fun. I mean, number one, because it's fun because it's messy. Like nobody looks glamorous eating ramen. So you just have to like,
you have to just dive in there, but it's beautiful. It's almost it's so beautiful you don't want to mess it up.
Well, and that's part of the art also that goes within it, right? Is how you create the bowl. But it's about the ingredients first and foremost. But ramen's great because it's like some other things like pizza. You know, it's like you just find the flavors. You can kind of do everything and anything you want. A lot of people think that it's Japanese, so it's very regimented and very traditional, all these things. Yes, but in some respects, but the tradition of ramen has always been innovation. So it's been different all over the country. So regional styles of ramen have sprung up over the last 100 years all over Japan. And we're simply doing the same thing. We're just taking, you know, the regional ingredients, which are really the best is what's around you, and doing and using the great seafood and the great produce that we have to create a unique kind of experience in this microcosm that's a delicious, messy, beautiful bowl of ramen.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. I'll get there one day.
Please
I would love that. When you look at various art forms, I'm curious, what inspires you the most?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that this really comes from being in the restaurant more, that I've really come to appreciate and understand how skill comes about. You know, that skill is crafted from countless hours of refining your technique. Skill comes from, people have natural skill, but skill is also built through this kind of almost tiresome repetition of intimately knowing a process or an ingredient that you work with, where at some point the boredom of doing that over and over kind of stops, and the body and the mind kind of take over the repetition of doing that. That frees up a sense of creativity that you bring more and more to that skill. And so I think that appreciation is also the same thing I appreciate about art, particularly those that have, you know, kind of straddle this nexus between expression and refined technique. And so I think that when you can see the layers of expression that come through that rendered skill in certain kind of works of art, not all works of art has that, but ones that really hone in on a skill and a mastery of that skill and different layers of expression is what I really get a lot of inspiration from. However, at the same time, like I think my definition of art is a bit hopelessly broad, because I feel like there's art in everything you do, whether you're mopping a floor or designing a spreadsheet, like how you approach that. Everyone is an artist if they choose to be in anything that they do. And so to me, that's the most important and beautiful thing about art, is that we can we can really do it in any human practice. And I try to do that about my ramen and about my science and about a lot of things I do, which gives another depth of meaning to what we create, right?
Absolutely. I always say your life is your own masterpiece. That's how you make it up is art. For
Absolutely.
sure. I'm curious, if you could remove one thing out of our society, what would it be?
Oh, fuck. Do I have to pick one?
I mean, you could pick one or two.
I mean,
I'm sure one of them is going to be social media, but because you're not even on it, so I don't think you are anyway.
Well, not to the extent. No, I do it for the restaurant, but I mean, cars, styrofoam,
yeah,
complacency. I mean, I don't know. I could pick one. Subsidies on food. I mean, really anything that continues to contribute to global problems rather than being a source of solutions, I guess I would say. And, you know, in all of those things, we can try to find and come up with creative solutions around them. And I think that's, again, what's so interesting about the problems that we face. As they see, there's a hotbed for innovation and for thinking differently and thinking creatively, which is this artful expression that we're talking about and gives meaning to you know, facing these problems that we're in. Because I think, as I said, I'm incredibly optimistic, maybe naively so, but I feel like these challenges are this ability to redefine and re-explore in ways that I find incredibly both challenging but also inspiring.
Well, it's also our responsibility, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's our responsibility at this point. It's at a breaking point for a reason, because we have not, I mean, you've been contributing in large ways, but for the most part, we have to really figure this out. And it's at a point where if we don't now, we won't have a planet. So it's essential.
I agree. I mean, and it's easy to like, and sometimes in my more pessimistic, it's like when we're down in the future, we're in this like crazy dystopian future. It's like, oh, well, at least we tried. Like at least we were like fighting the good fight. Like, no, that's not enough just to think that you're there. Like there is nothing but to overcome these challenges. But again, because of these upheavals, the adversity that we're facing is this opportunity for transformation. I think that it's putting us in the best position. And I wasn't this optimistic 6 months ago, not nearly.
Wow.
No.
So what changed? What changed?
I think it's all the upheaval that we're facing.
Okay.
You know, and this opportunity to say, how can we do this better?
So when COVID started and everything started, you were sort of like, this is okay, life. We're just heading for the worst possible scenario. And now, because of all this, which is a terrible situation, it actually really, now you feel like we have a shot.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of like, you know, pre-COVID, you know, when you're talking about the climate crisis, you know, world leaders are saying, oh, this is a big problem, but we don't have the money and, you know, we can't make this happen, yada, yada. And then Corona happened and we saw in the matter of days, the mobilization and the political will to mobilize trillions of dollars in a singular fight for a crisis. And we can do the same with the climate crisis. We've proven that it's possible to do this. And we can do it again with these other challenges that we're facing. And that's what's given me a lot of hope. In Norway, that we've had things have been, you know, there's been we have an oil fund, right? That a lot of people think, you know, Norwegians are super wealthy. And actually all of our oil fund, or at least about 94% of it, is invested into our pension fund. It doesn't go to the government. 6% or around 4.5% goes to the government. But 96% of it goes to our pension fund, and it's you know $1 trillion-ish pension fund for 5 million inhabitants.
Amazing.
But we've been tucking that away for a rainy day, and that rainy day has come. And so when the health minister stood up and is announcing these massive economic packages, he stood up and he said, "We have this oil fund that we've been setting aside, and now we're going to use it." Right. And now we're mobilizing the money to actually be able to overcome this in a good way. And the United States is doing its part. It's doing it a very different way. Not only all countries have the capacity to do it on the scale that some countries are. So the challenges are perhaps greater. But you see the political will that could be shaped there. You see the social will that can be shaped there when we say this is important enough. And we can do that with the sustainability crisis and the climate crisis that we're facing as well. And I'm very hopeful for
that. That's great. I feel more hopeful after speaking with you. Yeah, seriously. No, but I'm wondering because, you know, you've spent this incredible time, you know, being, you know, from, you said Kansas City, right? Kansas City or outside of, okay. And, you know, here you are in Scandinavia, very different lifestyle, very different life. What would be the advice for your younger self? I'm just curious.
Oh, wow. Well, I was not very good at being kind to myself when I was younger. I would say being kinder to myself. I liked a good challenge, and I often took the hard path. It may be some kind of masochistic tendency to want to travel the hard road to earn kind of the victories in a more deeper sense. But I wasn't very kind when I failed to myself. And I think that instead of embracing my failures and using them as an opportunity for learning and growing from them, I tended to just kind of move on and be like, okay, let's get away from that. And I think I didn't spend enough time just sitting with those failures, right? It's important to sit with your failures and understand, you know, what happened, and to take that as an opportunity for growth and understand the flaws that help create them, and consciously put in a plan to work on them, to kind of overcome them. And I think that I didn't take care of myself enough I'll be kind enough to allow myself to embrace failures, learn, and grow. And so I think I plodded on through, and I did learn eventually on some of those things, but I think I plodded on a little longer than I had to, more haphazardly and with less efficacy in learning from my past mistakes. But that comes from, I think, being honest and kind to yourself. And that's been part of a life lesson in my journey.
Yes, we are. I suffer the same. I'm incredibly hard on myself. As a matter of fact, you know, where I was going with that question was, I wish I had moved to Norway when I was young. Oh God, it sounds amazing. I want to move to Norway. No, but yeah, I agree. I think when you make life harder than it is, I mean, life is already difficult. It can be difficult. We're faced with so many challenges. Why are we making it harder for ourselves? I don't know. But yeah.
I think there's something, to me, alluring. I don't know if other people should. Again, it might be masochistic, but I feel like myself, I can only speak for myself, but I like to kind of feel human beings, we're at our most creative and innovative and most on when we're facing resource challenges. If we're really hungry, right, that's not when we're going like, oh, I think I'll just sit on the couch and wait for food to appear, right? That's when we go, okay, how am I going to go and make this happen, right?
Figure it out.
And and that's when we're going to be at our best, really. And so I think I used that as fuel in some way to push myself. And again, when I had successes, it was great. And I felt the sense of achievement from that. But when it did go so well, I didn't take it. I took it I took that as a failure of my own self, but didn't examine it further. So I don't know. I think that there are maybe it's a mentality that people who tend to be ambitious and want to I was always one that wanted to figure out the hard questions and do things that people never had done before. And there's probably a reason no one had done that before, because it was quite hard. But there was something that was very alluring about me. And I continue to kind of push those boundaries in the work that I do, but it does create a lot of challenges for yourself.
So it's the advice would be kind to yourself, to your younger self. Be kind.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. In the face of all those challenges that you put before yourself.
Wow. That's great. Thank you. This was so great. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really,
it's been a pleasure talking with you. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
All right. Take care.